Hello and welcome back. Today I have a little sketchbook session for you. You're welcome to bring out your own sketchbook or use your tablet, whatever you like creating with, and draw along with the video or just have me in the background. If you do draw along, you're welcome to post whatever you did on social media and use the hashtag #DrawWithMeDana so that we can all see each other's creativity. Today I'm using my Moleskine sketchbook and a Blackwing pearl. I like the Blackwing pearl because I can get really light line work to start, and then I can get really heavy lines and really heavy graphite applications if I press down really hard. There's a really nice range with the Blackwing pearl. So I'll start off by measuring the proportions and the angles of my reference. I am drawing from reference today because these are studies, and it's important for me in my practice that I do a lot of studying from reference in order to, well, for many different reasons, but one reason is to increase my visual library so that I can better draw from imagination, because you can only really draw things from imagination if you've drawn hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of that thing, or have a really good understanding of form and how to light form and so on and so forth. So I tend to do about half and half, drawing from reference, studying from reference, and then creating from imagination. And so this is me studying from reference. And whenever I'm studying, I go in with a few intentions. So my intention today with this was to try and get proportions and angles. So I was trying to work on my skill of observation primarily with this, and also to get a little bit more comfortable with the Blackwing pearl. I have been using the Blackwing pearl for a couple months now and I have been really enjoying it. But it's definitely different from other pencils I have just because of the wide range of pressure sensitivity it has. And you'll see that I start with a very light sketch with the Blackwing. It might actually be a little bit difficult to see at the start, which I apologise, but it'll get better as we go along. You'll see that I lay in the basic shapes, the proportions, and you'll see that I go in with my kneaded eraser to clean things up and to move things around if needed. I'm constantly checking that how everything is placed in relation to everything else on the skull. So I'm checking where I'm placing a canine in relation to the front of the skull, in relation to the eye socket. I'm checking the back of the skull in relation to the top and the bottom. I'm constantly checking and measuring and adjusting if needed. So the light sketch phase, or the rough sketch phase, is really important for me in laying down where everything's going to be. And it's also my correction phase. So you'll see, especially in the lower right of the skull, I do adjust that quite a bit because I noticed that I moved it way too far to the left, and I do eventually move it back to the right. And then once that's all in place, I go over the top with tight lines, which are much heavier and clearer to see. And I tend to do this process both traditionally and also digitally. I might do the light pencil sketch and then do ink line work on top, or pencil line work on top, as you're seeing here. It might not necessarily be super tight, it could be still quite rough. Or I might take the pencil sketch into digital and do tight digital line work on top, or even make it into a full illustration, like I did with the head you can see on the left page in the video that I occasionally cover up with my hand. I did those as parts of finding the the face position and expression and everything like that for the illustration I did last week. And you can see which one I ended up picking. So, if you see the mark on my right arm, don't worry about it. We recently got a new kettle, and it's stainless steel, brushed stainless steel on the outside. And who knew that a kettle that is stainless steel on the outside would get as boiling hot as the water within? Because I didn't. I reached over to get a tea bag over the top of the kettle, and now I have a mark on my arm that matches the circumference of the kettle lid perfectly. So I'm going to be a lot careful next time with this kettle, but there you go. It's healing up perfectly, so it's not, it's nothing to worry about or anything. But if you're wondering why it's there, then now you know. So as we're going with these sketches, you'll see that I do a very similar process with the second one as well. But I absolutely love doing line work, and for me, having the freedom from making sure that my undersketch is all in proportion and everything like that, I then have much greater freedom doing the line art on top, and I don't stick perfectly to the framework essentially underneath. I have that there so that I have reference that allows myself to more freely create marks on top. So I might deviate from the mark slightly, I'm not quite sure how to put it, to be honest. I do use it like a framework rather than a perfect, like I must follow this line perfectly or else something will go wrong. It's more just so that I have a reference for where everything is, and it allows me to be much more fluid and creative with my mark making. And I just love line work in general, as you'll see as I do more and more of these videos. I absolutely love line work to pieces. It doesn't matter what media I use. It can be traditional, it can be pencil, it can be ink, it can be digital. I just love line art. It relaxes me. It's just overall, it brings joy to me in my art creative process. And it's important that we find the things that bring us joy when we're creating. And that's another reason why I'm doing the animal skulls today, is because animals are one of my interests in art, or in general, really. I mean, I absolutely love animals to pieces, as well as characters and fantasy and certain historical periods as well. I'm probably gonna do a video at some point on finding your art interests and finding joy in your process. So I can go a little bit more in depth into what I particularly like in that, but animals is definitely one that's up there for me. So doing observational exercises and observational studies, you don't have to do things that everyone else says you have to do. You can mold exercises and studies to things that you find bring you joy. And animal skulls for me is one of those things. They're useful for me as well because I think about animal anatomy when I'm drawing animals. I don't draw the skull or the skeleton perfectly underneath every animal that I draw, but I do think about the skeleton and the skull and how it affects everything that's on top of it when I'm drawing animals. And it doesn't matter if those animals are from imagination or if I'm drawing animals from reference, I still think about the anatomy underneath. So having an idea of the animal skull and its structure and how it might differ from other animals within its species is pretty useful for me, on top of just all the different benefits you get from drawing from observation, such as improving your eye-to-hand coordination, your observational skills, your proportion, you're getting your mileage. There's so many different things you can improve through drawing from observation and drawing from reference. Not to discount drawing from imagination though, because that's a skill in its own right, and you need to draw from imagination too if you want to be able to draw from imagination, but that's a whole other thing to discuss at some point. But yeah, going back to the animal skulls thing, if you look at, say, big cats, and you look at the difference in a skull between a lion and a mountain lion, you can see massive differences. It might not be super obvious at first, but especially if you put them side by side, you can see differences not just in size, but in the proportion of different elements of the skull. And then if you take another big cat like a cheetah or a lynx, and then compare that to those, you'll notice other differences as well. You'll notice not only that the skull's smaller, but that the cheekbones might be more delicate or might be more pronounced in one versus another. Or you might notice that the ridge on the top of the cranium is larger on, say, the lion than on a cheetah. And you can also then consider things like why that might be, what their diet's like, their hunting style. And all of those things can help you not only gain a better understanding of the animal if you're interested in animals like I am, but also gain a better understanding of how it will appear when you're drawing it, and also how it might act if you're trying to come up with a character in your animal. Because animals are like humans in a way, with their own personalities, their own characteristics, and to gain a better understanding of how an animal would act gains you a better ability to portray that in art. For me, anyway. So, overall, I'm just having a good time with this. And I do encourage you to find what brings you joy when you sketch, what your interests are, and also bringing your interests into your studies as well. Another thing that I absolutely just adore, it brings me so much joy, is the feeling of a material on paper. It's why I always go back to traditional, no matter how much I might enjoy digital too. And I do definitely enjoy the feeling of a stylus on tablet too, but I just love the tactile sensation and the satisfaction it brings me to see media hit the paper, how it feels on the paper, what it looks like when the lines and the colours and the textures all start appearing. And that also brings me joy in how it feels as well to like put pencil on paper. So I have like various different kinds of pencils, different kinds of paper, because sometimes I'll want a specific feeling when I'm sketching. And the feeling of a moleskin can be very different from the feeling of a sea white sketchbook, for example. The feeling of a black wing is very different from a Mitsubishi pencil, and both of those are very different from a Faber-Castell pencil. And that's another thing for me that's really interesting and brings me a lot of joy. But to other people it might not. To other people it might just be a case of picking up a pencil and going with it. You don't care what kind of pencil it is, what kind of graphite it is, or how it feels on the paper. You might find joy in something else in the process, or you might be one of the people that finds joy in the outcome rather than the process. But it's all important to find out what you like and what you enjoy. But back to the skull. You can now see that the second skull's coming together now. And I went with a pretty similar process with the second skull. I was a little bit rougher with the initial sketch, but it ended up coming together in a very similar way as the top. But let me know, again, you have a minute to think what animal it is, because I'll say it in 3, 2, 1. The animal skull I was drawing today was a polar bear. So now you know. And I hope that you enjoyed this video, this little chat, and if you sketched along with me, remember you're welcome to use the hashtag in the description. And I'll see you next time. Have a good week. Bye!